Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
Welcome to Weird Web Radio. All you Weird Web Radio heads, it's good to have you here, and I'm glad I could bring you this show. This episode is going to feature a couple friends of mine, Greg and Dana Newkirk. Now, if you've been around the paranormal and the occult for a while, you've probably heard of them or seen them at a haunted or paranormal conference with their traveling museum of haunted objects. If you haven't, I highly urge you to get a hold of whatever local haunted or paranormal conference in your area and get them to book the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and Occult. I promise you it'll be one of the biggest hits at any conference that you see. Greg and Dana have been at this a long time, a couple decades worth of combined research into the paranormal, the occult, and also conducting a lot of experiments. I can say that because I've helped them conduct at least one on my own. And one day, I hope you all get to see that. Now, you can find Greg and Dana all over the internet. You can find them with their traveling museum. You can find them with their Planet Weird project at weirdhq.com. And they are just all around great people with a lot of really good insights, and they're pushing the boundaries and the envelope of what it is that we are so accustomed to as a status quo in the world of paranormal investigations. It was an incredibly fun time talking to Greg and Dana through the course of this episode. I really hope that you all enjoy it as much as I did creating it. Stay weird out there, my friends. Grab your popcorn. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Weird Web Radio. Tonight we have a couple very special guests, the up-and-coming paranormal superstars, Greg and Dana Newkirk. And I'm also very happy to say that this is the first show I'm going to have real friends on the show. So Greg and Dana, it's nice to have you here. Thank you.
Oh man, it's great to finally be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Oh, good. It's been a good long while since we all met, and like we just covered before we start recording, it's a top secret project for our ears only. But to just sort of get people familiar with you two, because I know that there's going to be people out here listening to the show that doesn't know who you are, and I'm really excited to introduce you to them. We know that you both met in a really funny way, but but before we get to that, you got into the paranormal somehow, somewhere. So what was it that got you to be pulled into the paranormal, or who was it specifically maybe that got you started?
Whoa.
I think if you want to talk who, it was probably Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Mulder and Scully.
For sure. Yeah.
We really watched too much paranormal television when we were kids, and I think eventually...
Or just enough.
Just enough. Yeah. Maybe that's the best way to put it. I remember the way that I started ghost hunting was we decided to go and basically cosplay Buffy the Vampire Slayer in a cemetery across from my house when I was a kid. I was like 11, 12 years old, and I had a slumber party, and we had some of the older kids waiting in the cemetery to scare our friend Nick, and it was so much fun that we started to go out and go to cemeteries without anybody hiding. And when weird stuff started to happen, we were like, oh my God, monsters are real. And we'd go to the library and, read books by, Hans Holzer and the Warrens. And then we were out every weekend and started a website and all that kind of stuff. So I've been doing it a long time, and I think Dana's probably pretty similar to me.
Yeah, my origin is pretty much the same as yours, aside from I probably also add a little unsolved mysteries in there because,
yeah.
Definitely got me and my friends out investigating the paranormal many moons ago. And again, kind of same thing. We started a ghost hunting group, and this was back in the old GeoCities days, so it definitely dates us. And we just went out and investigated as many places as we possibly could, and it became kind of an addiction, and it continued to fuel my curiosity about the paranormal.
I came late to the game. Here's a confession on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Most people don't know this,
and here comes my worldwide confession. I didn't watch a single moment of Buffy until the 20th anniversary promotion started rolling.
No,
wow. It's good though. Better late than never. I always tell people.
Before you say that, are you enjoying it?
Oh no, I binge watched my way through every season.
Wow.
And the problem is I honestly believe through my adult life that I did watch Buffy when I was a teenager. What happened was I watched some Angel episodes and believed I had watched Buffy.
Yeah.
But I'm with you on the Unsolved Mysteries. I think I made it a point to watch every single one of those episodes when I was a kid, much to the annoyance of my parents. And it also got me in two of the cemeteries that were just a few blocks away from the house into all sorts of trouble.
Have you found that even today, because they just put
they're re-releasing it.
Re-releasing Unsolved Mysteries with updates on Amazon right now.
It's amazing.
But every time I hear the theme song, I get scared. Even today.
It's like a trigger. Reminds me of being like 10 years old and terrified.
I did not know that they are re-releasing with updates. That is great news.
It's amazing. I literally have been binge watching it for like the past month because for the first 5 seasons are up right now. So with like updates. So I'm just blowing right through it.
And I'll be asleep while Dana's watching this in bed, which explains the nightmares.
Yeah. Subconsciously.
So going back to those cemeteries that you ran around in, Greg, what was the experience that told you something more is going on here than just a prank or a trick?
The one that comes to mind is there's a cemetery called Barclay Cemetery, not too far from where I grew up, and it's way up in the mountains. It's the only thing that's left from a ghost town. There's only foundations there, but the cemetery is still there, and it's straight out of a horror movie. The fog would roll in on the top of this mountain, and there'd be coyotes howling, and that was enough to freak us out. But we were walking through the cemetery, and the first ghost hunt we ever did up there, and we kept feeling these pebbles hit us in the back. And one of them hit me in the neck, and I managed to see it when it fell, and I picked it up, and it was actually a hunk of coal. So there was something up there throwing hunks of coal at us. And that's when we really freaked out and realized there's something stranger going on here. And after that, it was all in.
Okay, so something's throwing coal at you, and I've heard you say this on other shows and in your own, inside your own group where you provide fans and subscribers to the museum, inside information and a lot of really cool videos, that you think Bigfoot's a ghost.
I do. That's true.
And I've heard you tie Bigfoot back to this coal experience, if I remember correctly, that Bigfoot somehow got you started ghost hunting.
Years and years later, I hadn't been to the cemetery in a long, long time. And I went up with, I took Dana for the first time. And we were there with Jason Gowan. And we thought, just for fun, we're up there and there's coyotes and we didn't have any weapons or anything, and they were getting kind of close. So we started to kind of back off from the cemetery, and just for fun, we thought, let's do some Bigfoot calls. This area seems pretty squatchy. And so we did some calls, and then something started calling back. And then it was clacking rocks at us as we would knock trees. And then it started throwing something at us, and it was coal. And I realized, oh my God, what if all of this time, what we thought was a ghost was actually Bigfoot? So maybe in a roundabout way, Bigfoot got us interested in ghosts. I don't know.
It may be. I think it's fair to say stranger things may have happened. And now Dana, the girly ghost hunter from Canada.
Yes.
Tell us, what was your first experience that told you something more was going on here?
Oh, well, my friends and I would investigate as much as we possibly could. And we definitely experienced quite a few things. But the first experience that we had as a group that was altogether pretty traumatizing because of what we experienced happened in a place in Ancaster, Ontario called the Hermitage. And so the Hermitage, 100 years ago, maybe 75 years ago, was a massive old house, and there was a family that were living there, and it's burned down a few times. And because it was a historic site, the city decided to sort of leave the ruins there and turn it into a bit of a park, so you can kind of go and visit. But the land and the house itself have had a lot of legends attached to it. They kind of range anywhere from the ghost of the woman who previously lived in the home, who was in love with the house and in the land, all the way up to people experiencing shadow people and a whole range of different types of paranormal experiences. So when we were filming Girly Ghost Hunters, we had been to the Hermitage before, but we hadn't spent a long time there. So we decided it definitely had to be one of the locations that we visited. And so it was the last location that we visited, in the first season. And, the experience that we had was crazy. A group of maybe 7 or 8 of us witnessed these giant, 7-8 foot tall shadow beings that came out of the woods. And so you have to imagine that the ruins of the house are sort of it's falling apart and very spooky. And then on top of that, it's surrounded by about 3 acres of woods. So you're pretty isolated. And the only road to get down to the Hermitage is about a half a mile hike through the woods. So we're watching these 7 foot tall shadow beings kind of creep out of the woods towards us. And the best way I've ever been able to kind of describe them, was sort of like static from a television, but it was in the shape of a kind of elongated human being. And it seemed that they were kind of stalking us and herding us almost like cattle, sort of towards the exit area of the Hermitage and back up through the walkway to where our cars were parked. So it was myself and, again, like 7 other people, and we were all witnessing these things sort of like come at us, and then after a while they sort of dissipated back into the woods again. But I mean, the group of people who all experienced it was myself and the other Girly Ghost Hunters, but it was also crew who were like extremely skeptical about anything that was paranormal. So the experience was really incredible because, again, there was such a, range of people that got the chance to experience it, but also because it was so incredibly dramatic that, like, it was an unforgettable experience for all of us.
That sounds quite unforgettable.
Mm-hmm.
How far did you pursue looking into those huge shadow figures?
Well, there's a lot of people, actually. We found this out afterwards. There were a lot of people who've actually experienced the same types of things. So there are legends that the land at one point was sacred Native American land, that people have used it for rituals. And so there's a lot of legends kind of attached to it. But there are also a lot of people who are pretty credible people who have visited the same area and had very similar experiences. So learning that after the fact was pretty incredible, again, for the group of us, because we, prior to that, had, we'd read about shadow people, and we'd read about there's legends of like glowing green corpses that float around. But, we weren't expecting to have that experience. So once we had the experience, it kind of gave a lot of weight to the experiences that people had before and then again afterwards.
So as you two got started into the paranormal, now that you're in, you know something's going on, you're starting to do your own investigations, who were your influences?
Ooh. I mean, I think our influences, it's funny because, I think for obvious reasons, some of the first stuff that I'd read, Ghost Hunters, that featured, Ed and Lorraine Warren's investigations, and read a lot of, Hans Holzer. And, then there were other influences like MTV's Fear or Scariest Places on Earth.
Yeah.
And, they featured a lot of people. Someone that I had a lot of early conversations with was a guy by the name of Lou Gentili. And he worked very closely with the Warrens and John Zaffis. And he's not a name that most people recognize these days. So there were a lot of different people. And eventually it got to the point where, I know that a lot of my influences, I can look back now and appreciate the fact that they got me interested and started. But the longer I'm in it, the less I'm agreeing with a lot of the things that they believe, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing.
No, not at all.
What about you, Dana?
I mean, I'm the exact same boat as you. Sort of, a lot of those early influences were the same people, and you kind of just get to a point, I think, where you realize that you've kind of got to strike out your own path and start investigating the way that you feel is the right way to investigate, which is pretty much what we've done.
Sure. I think it's abundantly clear that you two especially have grown beyond whatever may have gotten you started. It's nice to establish that base to see, how many people have always come from sort of these same influences in the earlier days, especially when it comes to the Warrens.
Oh, yeah.
They're a name that come up again and again and again. And I think I saw today that Lorraine Warren is announced her official retirement from all things
I saw
paranormal.
That. Yeah. Crazy.
She's in her 90s now. She's been doing it forever.
Yeah.
But good. Lorraine will enjoy her retirement, I'm sure.
Not for what years are left, and then she's going to be pestered like hell when she's in the afterlife.
Exactly.
You mark my words.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Everyone's going to be pulling her through on ghost boxes.
Be like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. How many seance rooms would be filled with?
Yeah.
I think so, and probably many at the same time.
Well, that brings to mind some very interesting theories on how the spirit works, but we'll get into that. Okay, so let's go back to the thing that made you laugh in the very beginning. The story on how you two met is pretty unique. Who wants to tell it?
I always let Greg tell this story because it was all his fault.
Yeah, it really was all my fault. I was not the nicest kid when I was younger. I was very angsty, and as were a lot of my friends. But when Dana, so Dana and I met online when we had rival ghost hunting websites, and so I thought. When she'd originally, let me stop for a second. I got distracted. So Dana and I ran rival ghost hunting websites as kids, GeoCity sites, and Dana eventually reached out because, we were all kind of the same age, and, there weren't a ton of ghost hunting websites out at that time, and they weren't too far. They were just like maybe 4 or 5 hours from us. And we struck up this online friendship. Well, eventually they got the Girly Ghost Hunters television show, and we were a bunch of really jealous boys. And because of that, we just kind of like thought, well, where's our TV show? And so we kind of got unnecessarily aggressive and mean about it.
Kind of,
yeah.
Well, yeah.
And what I ended up doing was I got all of my friends to recreate their website with all of us in drag, and then we SEO bombed the crap out of it. So when people searched for the Girly Ghost Hunters, they actually found our site first, and just did everything we could to be a massive pain in their ass. And I think
but you succeeded
very well at. So much so that Dana didn't speak to me for years. And even when I was trying to send her emails and apologize, and eventually it got to the point where it'd been 5 to 7 years, and I'd sent multiple emails and I hadn't gotten a reply. And so I said, well, I'm moving to Seattle. I'm moving all the way across the country. I'm going to regret this if I don't apologize and know that this is fine. And so I rented a car and I printed out photographs of the Girly Ghost Hunters, and I drove to the city that I knew that they lived in 5-7 years ago, and just started walking around asking people. And I had found one of them within half an hour, and she was so shocked to see me. They thought that I had come there to, tar and feather them and make fun of them some more, but I had to convince them that wasn't the case. And Dana and I went on a ghost hunt that night. She still made me drop her off 4 blocks from where she actually lived, because she didn't want me to know where her dress was.
I didn't,
so,
yeah.
Which I can go out and ghost hunt the guy, but
well, it was a group of us.
There were far more of them than there were of me.
Yeah, we could have taken.
Okay.
I just didn't want him to know where I lived so that he couldn't come back and murder me later on that night.
And then we just kept in contact, and then
now we're married.
Here we are. We've been together 10 years and married 7?
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Well, congratulations.
My
romance
dastardly plan worked.
A romance that starts like a NBC Dateline special turns out to work in your favor.
I wouldn't suggest anyone else there use those tactics.
No.
Probably not great.
Oh no, that same scenario today would be, Dana behind a window with the Facebook Live video going, someone called the police.
Yeah.
This man is stalking me.
My intentions were pure. They were pure intentions.
Well, good. Now, I know you guys came to my attention initially with your old site, Who Forted.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God.
And I don't remember how it was exactly, but you guys were looking for writers, and I sent an email in, and you accepted after you looked at my blog. And that's kind of how we started our friendship and our connection.
Right.
And I published, I think, two different articles got published on there. It was Currency of the Dead and Casting Curses.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're still up there today, and I thank you for that. It's really cool to see those there. So, way back when, why did you launch Who Forted?
Oh, well, I mean, Who Forted was actually, it happened because we had a really nasty MySpace account that got deleted. That was full of really awful, mean photoshops of paranormal celebrities, and it eventually got deleted, and we decided, okay, well, we'll just create a website, and that was sort of
It was
why
basically
it
a
happened.
giant FU to the people who were getting our stuff deleted. We're like, well, we're going to start something you can't delete.
Inevitably, it became something much better than just a landfill for bad photoshops. But,
I don't know. I might beg to differ.
yeah, I guess
I
that's
think
true.
that it got a little more sophisticated, but
Yeah.
not much more.
No.
It really was. Who Forted, by all accounts, was really just an outlet for unchecked aggression
Yeah.
against perceived injustices, I think.
Yes.
Is the best way to
Again,
put it.
remember Greg did say that he was a bit of a jerk back when he was younger, so.
I might have downplayed how much of a jerk.
I've always told people he spent the past couple of years doing a pilgrimage of apology.
Oh God, I'm still apologizing all the time
to many, many people.
Yeah,
I'm sure I have an email somewhere where he explains that about himself.
yeah. I'm sure. I was very, very angsty and felt. You know what? It took me a long time to realize that if you want people to listen to what you're saying, you need to actually build something cool. You need to present something neat and present your ideas in a palpable way. Just looking at something that you see somebody else doing that you don't like, and writing a takedown or a critique of it. I mean, that'll get people paying attention, but they're not generally the people that are actually going to be beneficial to have around you.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of what Who Forted was. Who Forted was a way to, it was a way to critique and to just,
To respond,
I think it was a
immaturely.
response, and it wasn't necessarily a mature response. And I think eventually it did kind of turn into a more mature response to a lot of things that we saw at the time going on in paranormal research and paranormal television. I mean, you name it. It was really just a way for us to respond to that type of thing. And eventually, we just realized that the people that it had attracted, with exceptions in a lot of cases, like people like you, that was the outlier. Most of the people who were attracted to Who Forted were attracted because of the aggressive nature of it and
the drama
around it. And
For sure.
we eventually just one point kind of looked at each other and said, I hate what this has become.
Yeah.
And what we've built was really just an empire of negativity. And so that's why, Who Forted wasn't, that's why it's not around anymore.
Yeah.
And at least not in that form.
We technically, I guess we tore it down and rebuilt something better in its place, which is Weak and Weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed. Weak and Weird is I remember when that evolution took place. Who Forted kind of went away, and you both had made it pretty clear why you were doing it at the time, and then launched Weak and Weird. So, you take your lessons forward from what you were learning on Who Forted, and you create Weak and Weird. what do you like most about that change?
The positivity. There's a lot of people who took the change pretty hard, I think, because a lot of people, accused us of, selling out, and, you don't write the critiques that you used to. And I mean, I think what people don't understand is we still have a lot of the same beliefs that we had. Mm-hmm. It's just that our way of reacting to those is a much mature and actually a much more accomplished way of dealing with them, because now, back then, I actually just had this conversation at a conference we were just at, and one of the followers from Who Forwarded back in the day, it was the end of the conference, and he was another speaker, and we were just kind of sitting around having beers, and he was fine. I mean, I can see where he's coming from. And he was like, these days you're not writing that kind of stuff anymore, and you're not holding anyone's feet to the fire. And my response to him was, yeah, but the difference is there was only one kind of person listening back then. And now what we can do by being positive and making changes and actually trying to enact the changes that we wanted to see back then personally, we're able to actually go to these conferences and, stand in front of several hundred people and show them why we believe what we believe, mm-hmm. and why we think that looking at something, this way instead of this way is better. And they're more apt to listen and take that to heart. No one was asking us for our opinions back then. We were just shoving them down people's throats.
Yeah. I think another one of the things that I like about it now is that, when we did kind of do the switch and we switched over to Week in Weird, we went through all of the content and all of the articles that had been written by other people and realized that we had other people like you, for instance. We had all of these great, really well-written articles that deserved a better place to be,
right,
as opposed to kind of a blog that people kind of often would refer to as the TMZ of the paranormal, just something like that. We realized going through all of this content that we had all of these brilliant articles that were written by really intelligent people who legitimately cared about the subject matter, and they deserved a better platform than we could give them with Who Forwarded.
And there you have it. Evolution is real. People can change and grow. You're essentially saying that with Who Forwarded, you began as internet paranormal trolls.
Kind of. Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
And grew into the internet paranormal help desk.
That's how I would like to see it. And it's funny, to harp on about positivity. A lot of the people that we were talking some mad trash about back in the day ended up becoming some of our best friends today. And there are a lot of the people that have given us opportunities today, and they definitely did not need to do that. And it's one of those reasons that I look back on those days and I think, I'm frankly pretty ashamed of some of the things that, I said and did, especially because a lot of these people have ended up being so much nicer and so much more positive for the field than I ever would have wanted to believe. And I think that, that speaks volumes to talking about things you don't understand before you've really made an attempt to understand, why people, say certain things or do certain things. And it's just, the change has been an absolutely fantastic one. So, the Who Forwarded days are easy to laugh about these days, but the real fact of the matter is I'm not terribly proud of them.
Well, I don't blame you, but it's nice to see that you're willing to own up to it. I like that you're not trying to shove it away. You're not trying to hide from that. You've even transformed some of those most negative things about it into very positive relationships today.
Well, I mean, the part of the thing that I like to do a lot now is I can see people who are kind of doing that knee-jerk reaction to, whether it's something they see on TV or something they've read, or a piece of research they don't agree with. And I can see how they're reacting to it. And I know that it's really coming from a place that's not out of genuine desire for the field, because I've been there. I've reacted that way. And I can say that to somebody, and then I can tell them, like, listen, let me lead by example. Here's what things were like, when I believed like that. And then here's what they're like now, when I've decided to actually, instead of tearing stuff down and wasting all of my energy, to try and build something different. People actually are listening now, and I can see people paying attention. It's night and day.
That's a good place to ask, what moral or controversial issues about paranormal investigation sticks out to you?
Oh, this is a bag of worms.
That's what I do best.
Where to start,
Yeah.
I think, is the best place. I think something that disturbs me a lot, especially these days. I think that this is, we talk about the people that influenced us, and I think the Warrens obviously come to mind. So I went back and I read Ghost Hunters again for the first time since I was a kid, in high school. And reading that book again, the one that influenced me a lot, I was kind of shocked, actually, because it was so reductionist in the way that every single case that they took on had to do with a demon.
Yeah.
It was as simple as, the kid who played Dungeons and Dragons was possessed by a demon. The guy who smoked pot was possessed by a demon. Even to the Native American kid who was adopted from the reservation. He had demons because of his heritage. And that's really disturbing, because I can see these days how that's affected the field. Mm-hmm. And I can see that a lot of people these days are pretty reductionist about that. And they're going into people's homes and they're telling people, well, what you have here is a demon. I'm not saying that I don't think that negative entities don't exist. But what I'm saying is I think that they're far more rare than the community would have us believe, at least a bulk of the community these days. And it's not really getting us anywhere. And so, especially doing what Dana and I do with the museum these days, it's kind of an outreach thing to be like, listen, if there's stuff attached to these objects, you're actually kind of torturing it if you take it and refuse to understand it and put it on a shelf and just kind of keep it hidden there for forever. That's actually a really horrible thing if you think that this is intelligent and you're not taking the time to understand it. So I think that as far as moral issues go, I think that the way that people are approaching the paranormal, because of people like the Warrens and because of people who come at it from a purely religious standpoint, I think is unhealthy and frankly immoral. That's one of the biggest ones that I think we've taken issue with these days.
Yeah. And like Greg said, we see it a lot with the museum because, again, there's kind of often negative connotation with regards to haunted objects. And people think, am I going to get an attachment? Is there a demon that's going to, follow me home? And so we do a lot of kind of talking people off the wall a little bit, or off the ledge and kind of fostering a little bit more curiosity than fear.
I think that's it. I think that
in a healthy way, of course.
The sense of fear in the paranormal, which I understand, it's fun to be creeped out and it's fun to be scared. That's the reason people go to haunted houses in October. But at the end of the day, I feel like that's actually hurting a lot of real work, and that's hurting anyone's chances to understand what's really going on, because fear is a brick wall. If you automatically say that thing that hurt me or that thing that scared me, that's a demon, well, you're not really trying to understand why it did what it did. You're just projecting your personal beliefs on it, and that's, I think, not just dangerous, but it's kind of sad. Because we found the more we work with these objects that people have thought are demonic in some way, they're really just trying as hard as they can to be understood. And people, I shudder to think at how many of these things might be intelligent that people have, burned or banished, or, thrown to the bottom of a lake. And that's a big part of what we talk about these days. And I mean, we give presentations where we show how we've watched something turn from something really scary to something that's, really intelligent and interactive and clearly not a quote unquote demon. And people have cried. I mean, we see it every time we talk, they start to cry. And part of me knows it's because a lot of those people are investigators who have jumped to that conclusion. So that's the biggest one. I mean, there's dozens of others. I mean, but that one I think is the most important to us.
Well, it's good that you're going out there and bringing that to attention too, especially to other investigators and educating the public, especially through your museum. I run into it as well. I've seen it for years where people often think, oh, it must be a demon. It must be a demon.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But if you expand your worldview out, I mean, I had this conversation with a friend of mine that's a part of my own religious outlook as a heathen. For anyone that doesn't know by now, that's just based on old, ancient Nordic worldviews. And, if you're going into a place or dealing with an object, if you automatically assume it's a demon, you've gotten rid of all this opportunity to recognize and learn something. And it could be an ancestral spirit whose only way of reaching out to you is smacking you once in a while or knocking things off a shelf.
Yeah.
It could be a land spirit that's tied to the land around the home who maybe is upset or offended by what you've done recently. It could be, any number of things. It could be a spirit attached to the house. Maybe it's the house itself emanating some kind of energy.
But see, that's the difference is we can sit here and we can discuss all of these different possibilities. But for so many people who've been, they've been raised or trained to believe that there are only two possibilities. It's either, it's a dead person or it's a demon. Mm-hmm. That's all they see. And so I think it's up to people who have that expanded worldview and who can approach things and understand that the world's a gray area. And it's up to us to try and spread that message because that's going to be better for everyone, for both spirits and for us, for paranormal research, and just the world in general.
Absolutely agreed. Now, there's also a lot of people out there, whether they think it's a demon or not, they find these negative influences in a home or a place and they feel like they need to clean or cleanse the area. That doesn't always work. Why do you think that happens?
I mean, what's funny is a lot of the times people will kind of ask us like, how do I get something out of my house if it's there? And, they'll say, I've tried, I've had a priest come in and do a blessing on the house. And, Greg or I will say, well, are you religious? Are you Catholic? And they'll inevitably most of the time say no. And we'll say, well,
why'd you expect it to work?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there are a lot of different reasons, but I mean, one of the things Greg and I always say is like, intention is everything. And even if there's kind of an inch of doubt, it will not work. And, one of the things I always say is like, if you believe your dad is the guy who can get rid of anything, he's the guy to get rid of anything.
Yeah,
bring your dad in and get him to do it. It doesn't have to be a priest.
Exactly.
Again, because it's all about intention.
And I also think that, there's a lot of people, and we see this a lot with objects that are sent to us. 90% of them don't ever do anything interesting for us once we get them. But for the people that have them, they are 110% haunted. I think a lot of people unwittingly most of the time are haunting themselves. And I think that they're the source of their own haunting. And they, until they understand that and until they understand how to combat that, that's not exactly going to go away because they're either influencing it or inviting it. And, a lot of times it's really hard to get that through to somebody because there's a weird thing that's, I think it's always kind of been there, but it's, I think more prolific these days with paranormal television being as big as it is. And, movies based on the Warrens and things like that. A lot of people really want, that experience. They want their house to be haunted. They want a book or a movie written about them or an episode of Paranormal Witness. So I think that with those types of people, there's not much you can do because that's really kind of what they want.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It seems that people do want their house to be haunted, although it's hard to find people who haven't had some sort of experience in their home.
Sure.
I don't know how much of that arises, like you said, from their desire and their intention versus what's actually happening from the home. You bring up a really good point with intention, too. Michael Kelly, who is an author and a magician, has, in a conversation I had with him before, suggested that items specifically hold their own charge and create influence through their design as it interacts with our own psyche. So in essence, he's basically saying that a haunting or a curse or a haunted or cursed item it's not actually put on the item from someone else, that it's something that arises from the object itself. What would you say to that?
I can get behind that for sure. I mean, it's like some things you look at. For example, we have a box that's called the clown box, and it's full of porcelain clowns. And to most people, those are really creepy. Those are some scary things. And I think that, people look at them and they realize, wow, that thing's terrifying. And they just kind of assume that it's haunted. You look at certain things and they just kind of hold something in their image. People have been worshiping images for centuries. There's some things that are innately designed to hold a kind of power and to hold a kind of feeling. And so I think that absolutely things they give off an aura, depending on what they look like. It's not very often that you find a crucifix is haunted. You know what I mean? But I tell you what,
it's usually the gargoyle.
It's the hot topic
holder.
Gargoyle incense holder. That's haunted.
Or those, like you said, creepy porcelain clowns.
Right.
Things are innately frightening.
Yeah, you have this, I think something happens too between the consciousness of the viewer and the object itself. There may have been nothing there to worry about or think about before, but once this interaction between object and viewer takes place, something real and tangible can occur that might actually be measured and noticed by others around it.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And, I think we've even got objects that act exactly like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And depending on, it's funny, like we've got the dark mirror. It's a scrying mirror. And depending on the vibe of the people at the event who are staring into it, that kind of dictates what a lot of people will see in it. The next event we go to. We see it all the time. It's a really, really fascinating thing to experience.
Yeah. So like, for instance, if we'll bring it to an event and generally most of the people there are kind of having great experiences, and some of them are people have witnessed, deceased relatives and pets and ancestors and all that good stuff. If it's a good experience, like you were saying, those types of experiences, again, will dictate the next group of people. And sometimes it goes through kind of a dark period where people will have these kind of really frightening experiences.
But I think that's dependent on the crowd.
Yeah.
I mean, we do a lot of different events for a lot of different crowds with different vibes. And so, if we do one where it's a very love and light vibe, there's a good chance that most of the people at the next place are going to see positive things. But if we do one where it's a vibe where, all these guys want to fight the ghosts in the building, they're already amped for having a terrifying experience and a scary experience and an aggressive one. And they're going to stare into the mirror. And then, funny enough, the people at the next event who look into the mirror are going to have weird, scary, aggressive experiences. It's very interesting.
That is very interesting. It's like it's carrying a resonance or something. It's being charged from one place, and then, like you said, it carries it on to the next one. That's the interesting part.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we do when the mirror's in our home is it's never on display. And
not anymore.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's because it's like a battery, really. It kind of gets charged up at these events, and then, when in the beginning, when we would bring it home, all of the other items, if they were out on display or even if they weren't, a lot of them would kind of be very active, and we were noticing, okay, well, maybe it has some kind of correlation to the mirror. So when we would keep the mirror, in a box that, and, you know, wasn't kind of out and we weren't looking at it and passing it and recognizing it from day to day, the activity would kind of quiet down. So, I mean, even in that instance where it's, you know, it's going to these events and getting charged up by people, when we bring it home, it goes right into the box so that it can't kind of create that same type of activity in our home.
Okay. Some people, I think, probably consider you too crazy for living with all these objects in your home.
That'd be a fair assumption, probably.
Yeah. I'm here, folks, to verify they are indeed bizarre people, but that's why we love them. And there's a lot of talk out there, debate back and forth on whether or not the paranormal is dangerous.
Sure.
And I mean, you just talked about an object from one place to the next can change its very nature and how it influences the crowd that views it. And something in that back and forth between the viewer and the object, you know, changes the whole vibe of how it interacts. Has there ever been a time when being involved in the paranormal you think has brought you close to real danger?
Oh God, yeah, a lot. I mean, but it's one of those deals where, you know, eating spaghetti can be dangerous. You can choke on it, you know. I think, you know, doing the kind of things that we do, we have. You can attest to this. We regularly will kind of put ourselves in situations that might not be the best for us because we think we're going to find something out. We're going to understand something better. We're going to understand a situation better. You've been part of those experiences.
Yes, I have.
And so, you know, we kind of actively are looking to do that type of thing, if it means that we're going to get a benefit out of it. So, you know, I don't think that our experiences are usually typical. You know, there's artifacts that we have in the collection that I do think have the capability to be dangerous. I don't necessarily think that means that they're evil per se, as much as they just really want to be understood, or they just really want to go home. Honestly, most of the scariest experiences that I've had in the paranormal come from people in the paranormal, or dangerous places that I've been in the paranormal. I'm not saying that I don't think that, you know, there's not stuff out there that can't hurt us, but I'm far more scared of people and places than I am of ghosts.
Yeah, there are plenty of rotten floors out there.
Yes, I've fallen through a couple.
And I'm glad you bring up people. One of my favorite stories that you guys have told before, I really want my audience to hear.
I think I know what one you're talking about.
Is the time an object saved your life.
Oh, yeah.
You want me to take it?
Yeah.
All right. So we were on our way back from an event in New Hampshire, and we were somewhere around Maryland at this point, and it's middle of the night. It's probably 2 a.m, somewhere around there. And stopping to get gas and kind of stretch our legs and grab something from a convenience store, keep us awake, because we were just planning to drive through the night. And as I was pumping gas, there was a guy who noticed my Art Bell bumper sticker, and it says, "Honk if you listen to Art Bell." And he was like, "Oh, I love Art Bell. I miss him on the airways." And we started talking about our favorite Coast to Coast episodes. And then
Malachi Martin was the best one.
Yeah. I don't know. I kind of like the one with the guy flying into the Area 51.
True.
That one's really good too.
All right. Sorry.
Anyway, Mel's Hole.
Mel's Hole.
All right, now we got to stop. I go on all day. So that's kind of what was happening at the gas
throw
pump.
in from Mitch Horowitz.
So we were having this conversation, and then he sees the other stickers, and there's like a Bigfoot sticker, and there's a Planet Weird sticker, and there's a MUFON sticker. And so he's like, "Oh, you guys must be paranormal investigators." And I was like, "Yeah, something like that." And he's like, "Well, listen, while you're in town, there's this thing you got to check out. Just down the road, down in Friendsville, there's just outside town, there's a cemetery, and it's been abandoned for the longest time. People see this red-eyed monster out there all the time." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is fantastic. We're looking for a thing to do to stretch our legs and get our brains working again."
Yeah, I mean, like, one of the things that Greg and I do a lot too, because we travel so much, when we do get the chance to kind of visit places that you can't find on the internet.
Oh, absolutely.
Like local kind of haunted places or legend places, we will usually try to go to them, because any chance to go and kind of experience what like a small community is, sort of urban legendy place, you have to.
So this guy gives me this hand-drawn map, and I told Dana, and Dana's like, "Yeah, let's go, let's check it out." And so we drive maybe 15 miles or so down to Friendsville, and it's a creepy little town. There's not a single thing open, one stoplight, and we have to go further outside of town. And we get to this field, and we're kind of creeping along real slow because the cemetery is supposed to be out on the other side of this field. And we're just kind of creeping along real slow, seeing if we can see this thing. And all of a sudden, up over the ridge, these headlights come barreling up, and the car doesn't slow down, and it just goes pow and hits us right in the back. And I thought, oh my God, this is the last thing I want. We're in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. So I very calmly got out of the car, walked around to the back. The first thing I do is to look at the damage, and it's not bad. It's a plastic bumper. There's a big gash in it, but it's not terrible. It felt worse than it was. And then I turn, I look to see, how the car is, and I see that it's this big boat of a car. It's like an old Lincoln. And as the driver's side door pops open, the dome light comes on, and I can see there's 4 people in the car. There's 2 really bizarre looking dudes in the back seat, and they've got these weird kind of like long bowl cut haircuts almost down to their shoulders. They look like they're dressed up, getting ready to go to church. There's a woman in the passenger side, and she looks like Tammy Faye, just big bright makeup all over her face, real big hair, almost touches the top of the car.
I always tell people it was like, I was basically like, we are now in an episode of True Detective.
Yeah, it's kind of what it felt like.
What's happening right now.
And the really scary dude though was the side dude, the driver. He looked like Harry Dean Stanton, so he already looks a little creepy. And as he walks into the light, I can see that he's wearing a suit. I remember his bolo really clearly because you just don't really see bolos that often. And then I can see as he gets into the light, a whole half of his face is bruised and one of his eyes is just completely bloodshot red. And it was super unsettling. Really got this feeling I'd seen this guy before. I don't know if it was because he looked like Harry Dean Stanton or what, but he had this kind of weird, almost Southern accent, and he was saying, I'm really sorry about that. Are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Are you okay? He's like, well, yeah, everything's fine. We should probably exchange information. And I said, we don't have to do that, man. It's fine. I was like, this car's, it's not worth a ton. It's really just a scratch. It's not a big deal. He's like, no, I insist. I think we absolutely should. And so I thought, okay, great. This is going to be a whole other thing. And so I walk back to the car, sit down in the seat, and kind of trying to tell Dana what's happening as I'm rummaging through the glove box. And then all of a sudden, I hear one of the boxes in the back of the car. And it's a 2006 Scion XB that the back seat is never up. It's just filled. There's old chests and leather cases and all kinds of stuff in there that holds all of the artifacts every time we go to do an event. And I can hear one of these boxes just rattling like crazy violently. And I'm thinking, oh God, that's bizarre. I haven't heard that happen. And as I turn, Dana and I both turn to look and see what box is doing this. I notice that the driver hasn't gone to his glove box. He's actually gone around to the back of his car and popped his trunk. And the 2 weird dudes in the back seat were getting out of the car. I said, F this. And I hit the pedal to the metal, which it's a Scion. It doesn't go very fast. This is
fast enough.
This is the fastest it's ever gone. And we just barreled out of there. I mean, I must have driven for half an hour straight without stopping as fast as I could go. I don't know what was going on there, but I know people don't typically keep their insurance information in the trunk.
Yeah.
Whatever was going to happen there, I would not have seen if I hadn't turned around to see what box was rattling. And I'm fairly certain we were probably either going to get robbed or worse at that point.
Yeah, when for obvious reasons, we have this conversation often because, it's a pretty terrifying thing to have happen. But what we think happened was the guy at the gas station basically set us up because he must have saw our car and thought we were moving because it's full of stuff. So he probably thought, oh, their TV, they've got stuff, they've got to have stuff in there that they can steal.
Man, would he have been disappointed?
Yeah, little did he know they basically would have gotten a car full of haunted objects. So likely we would have gotten them all back within a week.
So nobody go to Friendsville in the middle of the night. The name is deceptive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you were probably set up. And good for you to listen to your intuition anyway. I mean, a box starts rattling.
Oh, if it was that important, he could have followed us to the gas station half an hour away where there's lots of people and lots of lights.
You bet. Yeah. Did you ever figure out what box it was or what was in it making the noise?
See, there's two things. It was either the box that has the crone in it, or it was Billy who actually had his own seat in the back seat, like rattling against the boxes. It was either one of those two things. Because when we got to the next gas station, we were just like rubbing the different boxes
trying
and
to
shaking
make the
them.
same sound. Yeah.
So it was either Billy or the crone, and I kind of don't think it was the crone.
No.
I don't think she cares about us that much.
Maybe the crone was excited that something was about to go down.
Yeah.
She's like, yes.
It was not a warning. It was a cheer.
It's actually funny you say that because that I think has happened at the church. Remember that night where we went to the church and there was something on the roof and the box started rattling in the back?
That's right. Like
it was her.
psyched about it.
Yeah, that could be.
Saved by enthusiasm.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so we've gotten into some of the objects now. Some of the people may not know what they are. So let's jump into the museum. Why did you start the traveling museum?
We actually started it by accident, really, for the most part. We were doing a lecture that you might be a little familiar with a couple years ago that was about how to get abducted by aliens. And the event organizers gave us a table, and we didn't really have anything to sell or, to put out on the table. So we thought, okay, well, let's bring a couple things from our investigations and see how it goes. And for the most part, people responded really positively to the objects, and it sort of just spiraled from that point on.
Yeah, it was, we had maybe, 6 items on the table and like handwritten signs, and, people kept stopping and asking us questions, and we realized, well, this is interesting. There's not very many paranormal museums out there, and the ones that do exist, they're nestled very tightly on the East Coast. What if we took this serious and we, did a traveling museum, and we actually took this stuff to people and we let them interact with it and we let them, investigate the stuff for themselves? And what if we did events where we could help host the ghost hunts and let people investigate the artifacts while we're there and see how they change activity and see how people respond to them? And we just kind of slowly went from that idea, and it's just spiraled out of control. At this point, it's almost our full-time job.
Mm-hmm. We receive objects all the time.
Constantly. We have a post office box that's dedicated just to it now. We did a 10-hour round trip to Tennessee a couple weeks ago to pick something up. It's just turned into this whole crazy thing we never anticipated it would be.
Yeah. Well, you caught lightning in a bottle. It's an interesting way to go about doing business, and I'm sure a lot of people are pretty excited to get the chance to interact with an object like that.
That's the fun part. Not many people ever have that opportunity, and it's cool that we can take that stuff to people because not everyone can get to John Zaffis's museum, and now that Lorraine Warren's retired, I don't think that her museum's probably going to be available to people much longer, at least not in the way that it always has been. So it's cool to be able to take that stuff to people and bring that experience to them, and it's a way in our overall goal, I think, is to make people, like we touched on earlier, less afraid of the paranormal, but more curious, more willing to understand and maybe step outside of their own comfort zones, to experience this type of thing and hopefully understand it better.
What's your process for handling the objects, and how do you determine if they're haunted or not?
It's a pretty long process. I mean, for the most part, you know, a lot of what we do takes months and months to kind of like come to any sort of conclusion. And we have a pretty lengthy checklist that we will go through when we initially kind of receive things. And it's a lot of documenting and a lot of experimenting and a lot of continuing to do some of the same experiments over and over and over again and collecting as much evidence as we possibly can. So it's really, and then again, at the same time, it's also from object to object. So it can vary really for the most part. Some, like Greg was mentioning, you know, sometimes we'll get objects that aren't active at all for months or even years. And then sometimes out of the blue, all of a sudden there's activity around them. So, and we can have objects that are very active when we initially receive them that, you know, that activity dissipates. So it really does depend sort of from object to object.
And I think a lot of that process involves, you know, one of the things we're always adamant about is we want people to give us as much of a paper trail as they can give with these objects.
Yeah.
We have them, we prefer it to be handwritten, to write down every experience they've had with it, as much detail as possible about the object, where it's from. That's the first step, is to figure out exactly whose hands it's traveled through, where it came from, what it was used for, what kind of activity they've experienced with it. And then once it arrives here, generally what we do is we'll put it under surveillance, and we'll leave it under surveillance for, you know, a week, 2 weeks, sometimes a month, depending on how or if activity kicks up. We'll investigate it further. Taking it out and actually having other investigators investigate the stuff, seeing how it interacts in a haunted place, seeing how it interacts with, you know, a lot of people around, you know, will it be active in an EVP session? Does it not do anything? Does it give us, you know, strong electromagnetic field fluctuations? Like Dana said, it's case by case, depending on what it is. But for the most part, it's really just, hurry up and wait, you know, stare at it for a really long time and wait for it to see if it'll do something.
Well, you've got one rock star of the museum that seems to be the face of the museum right now, and that's Billy. And it's a pretty interesting story in a lot of ways, and how Billy arrived and has changed over time. What about Billy makes him so special?
That's what we're trying to figure out. As far as like active objects go, Billy, I think, is, you know, he's the standout. And I don't know if it's just because he's a showboat or what, but Billy is the name we gave an African idol, West African, that was found under a house in Dayton, Ohio, wrapped in a burlap sack, bound in twine. He'd been down there for quite a long time, it appeared. The guy had only lived in the house for about 6 months before he found him. He was running some new cable, and just finds this kind of lump of dirt and cobwebs and brings it upstairs, and he opens it up, and there's this statue. And almost immediately their kid says, "A little man's coming in my room at night. He's pulling the covers off of me while I sleep." He was terrified. They thought, it's kind of a scary looking statue. He's just having nightmares. And then they started to notice that things were strange in the house after that. They could hear somebody rummaging through their kitchen. They could hear the doors slamming, faucets turning on and off, you know, typical haunting stuff. And then eventually they started to have nightmares, and they were really vivid, often gory and violent nightmares. And the guy had heard us on Coast to Coast talking about some of the stuff, and sent us an email the next day and said, "Hey, I was going to send you this thing, but when I found out you guys were in Cincinnati, you're only an hour from me. It's really heavy. Will you meet me somewhere? And I'll give it to you, and you'll save me a ton on shipping." I was all for it. Dana said, "No way we're going to meet this weirdo from late night radio."
Well, I mean, yeah, it took a little convincing, but I guess the agreement was that it would have to be in a really public place. So we exchanged in a Walmart parking lot, which was equally
even
terrifying.
Scarier.
Well, there's never any crime that happens in a Walmart parking lot.
Never. And we kind of expected this guy to be, you know, to be kind of a weirdo. But man, he just looked like a really scared normal, everyday dad. He had a baseball cap real tight on his head, like he didn't want anybody to recognize him. And he's got this burlap sack held way out.
Like a sack of potatoes.
Like holding it far away from his body as he could. And he saw me waiting next to the car, and he walked up and said, "Is your name Greg?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, it's your problem now." And he gave it to me and then just started walking away. And I kind of was taken back because I hadn't seen anybody respond that way before. And he just clearly didn't want anything to do with it. Didn't even want to hang around and talk about it. Nothing. And I stopped him and I said, no, you got to tell me about this dream. It took some convincing. He wouldn't tell me the stuff his wife dreamed about. I think he just found it too disturbing. But he said the dream that was the last straw was he was in bed with his wife, and he was watching TV with his wife, and he just kind of calmly leaned over and grabbed a knife off of the nightstand, stabbed her in the chest, cut her, pulled her heart out, and started eating it. And he said it didn't feel like a dream. It was very visceral. He could taste the blood. He could smell it and feel how warm it was. And that was it. And so with that information, I got back in the car and told Dana what had happened. And she kind of sighed and said, "Oh, great." And the next day, I was excited because it's a really neat piece. I wanted people to see it. I wanted to see how they responded to it. I wanted to see what we could get off of it. We had an event the very next day. And on the way up, our car breaks down and we had to get towed by AAA. And the mechanic said, "There's nothing wrong with your car. It started right up." And this happened twice before we started to go, okay, the only new thing is this statue. What do we got to do? And we started reaching out to different people. And it was a voodoo priestess from New Orleans who said, you should give him some rum and tobacco and explain to him what's going on, where he's at, because it's probably, he was put there for a reason, and he's probably been down there a very long time and now has no idea what's going on. And we did that, and those issues stopped. And we started to do EVP sessions with him at events, and they were crazy. The noises that would come out of them were just these deep guttural screams, these responses. And I mean, it was nothing like I'd ever heard about in my investigation career. A lot of the other people who were there had never heard anything like it before. And frankly, it scared everyone. Everyone did that thing where they automatically jumped to, oh, well, it's clear that this thing has got a demon attached to it. There's a demon inside of it. I mean, even we were nervous about it because, this was not like anything we'd experienced. And, there were times when we said, well, what should we do? Should we lock this thing up? But we kind of pushed past the fear and kept working and doing these EVP sessions. And eventually he started to speak, and he would remember people that he'd met before. He would start to say full sentences in these EVP sessions. Yeah, sometimes he would even request things as opposed to kind of cough. Or sometimes he would ask for coffee. He would ask for sweets. And it was this, we were realizing we're actually communicating with this thing, and it's not scary anymore. It's just, it's strange and kind of uncomfortable because you don't expect it. I mean, it's as much as we've seen strange things, we never expected anything like this. Yeah. And now it's at the point where, people are having dreams that they believe are influenced by Billy, but they're good dreams. Like he's trying to help them through something. People are bringing him stuff at events. He's responding to knock jokes in EVP sessions. We just took on this big 3D scanning initiative, and he was the first object that we went to scan. And it's bizarre. There's video of this whole thing. Every time we'd get to his face, there would be this weird shield up in front of it. And it got so frustrating. Eventually we did an EVP session. We asked, and he said, "Is it going to hurt me?" He was nervous about it. And as soon as we had this conversation with him and said, we're not trying to hurt you. We're not replacing you. He scanned just fine. There was no issue. So there's clearly intelligence there, and he clearly likes the attention. And he's kind of he's kind of the star of the show because he's what we use to show people this is the kind of thing that'll happen if you push past your initial fear of the unknown. You can develop this relationship and understand these things a little bit better. And, we're working with him more every day. So it's been a wild ride, but that's, we don't experience that type of stuff typically with most of our objects. Billy's really, really active and active in a way that's mind blowing.
Are you building an intuitive feel for the relationship with Billy?
I think so. Yeah, naturally.
It's funny too, because I think that a lot of people who spend time with him have, especially recently, and these are people who live all over the country. And I mean, they're really kind of able to sort of tap into like what he's wanting them to feel or think.
I mean, the perfect example, there are times when we'll be on an investigation and we'll have Billy on the investigation because we kind of like to use him as a go-between and tell him, hey, if there's spirits here that you can see that we can't, bring them in close so we can meet them. And it's interesting to see how places interact with him. But if the place has kind of like an overbearing feeling, we'll know that he's not enjoying it.
Yeah.
And we'll take him away. Like, we just get that feeling. I've seen Dana pick him up and move him away from people who just have a bad vibe.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and again, this is not just us. This is a lot of people who've spent some time with him. They, at an event when there's a lot of people that are coming up to the museum and checking everything out, every once in a while, there'll be a person who I just feel him going like, no, don't let her pick me up. Don't let her pick me up. So it's like, I kind of, I can feel that. And a lot of people, again, that spend time with him kind of get that sense that like they, if there are certain types of people that spend time with Billy, and again, Billy's one of the objects that we allow people to kind of handle and spend some time with them. If they pick him up and they're over the course of a couple minutes, he feels like he's getting heavier.
Yeah.
Usually it's because he doesn't want them holding him.
Yeah. Yeah. He's got there's an interesting way that he kind of lets us know. It's just like you said, it's intuitive.
Have you been able to discern what his original purpose was?
We have taken him. I mean, we were in San Diego not too long ago, and there's a museum of African history there. And we took him in and had a professor sit down and hang out with him. And he said, I've not seen anything with markings exactly like his. I can tell you he's from West Africa because he shows a lot of different features from that area. I can't bring it down to an actual tribe because he shares so many features. He's probably a couple hundred years old, but he can't seem to tell us anything more than anyone else. And he's a professor. So we're, stumped. And he won't tell us his real name. We call him Billy because he's an idol. Because, that's the funny joke part about it. But he apparently likes it. He just won't respond to questions about where he's from or what his purpose was. He won't tell us his name. He's gotten to the point now where, that's the question everybody will ask him at an event. Well, Billy, we know that's not your real name. What's your name? And he gets to the point now where he's literally gone, Kevin.
Yeah.
He just is sick of answering.
No, like he'll just flat out refuse to answer.
Yeah. So I don't, there's a lot of ideas as to why that is. I understand that might be because he feels like it'll give us power over him or whatever. But maybe it's just because he's changed and he doesn't want to dwell on what he was or what he was used for.
It could be. You're exploring it through plenty of physical reasons. I've seen that recently Katie of HauntME beat me to the punch and gave Billy his first tarot reading that I know of.
Yeah, it was. And it was this thing that just it just happened. It just kind of naturally happened. And it was because Ty said, has Billy ever had a tarot reading? And we all thought, well, that's weird. No, I never would have thought about that. And, she gave him a reading that was, it was great. I mean, people were crying at the end of it because it really kind of laid out this idea that, he's coming from a dark place into a light place and that he's changing. and that's a good thing. And that, maybe he can't leave, but eventually I think he will be able to, if he isn't able to. And I'm always ready for that day where maybe he just won't be there anymore, whenever that time is right for him.
Yeah, I'm that day could arrive. You never know when you're dealing with objects like this.
Sure.
But that leads to an interesting idea. Assuming that you're going to maintain ownership of all these objects your entire lives, what do you guys want done with those objects when you die?
I think we should probably think ahead, huh?
Yeah.
I've not really thought about this.
I would hope that, when we're old, like Lorraine, we'll have kind of picked out people.
Set up a contingency.
Yeah, we'll have found the right people to take care of the objects. And it might be many different people. You never know. You know what I mean? Like, Billy might just be, if he's still deciding to stay where he is, it may, we might just pick one person to take care of him who we would trust would be able to pick the person for them. So I would hope that by the time we get old enough to have to think about that kind of stuff, we'll have a really great group of people kind of around us that would be able to do that for us.
I mean, we meet wonderful people all the time. And, that's part of what we really like about having a traveling museum is we've been able to interact with and meet so many awesome people all over the country. And who knows what kind of people we're going to meet, 10 years from now. If we're still continuing to travel 10 years from now, the way we are now, who knows who we're going to meet? There's plenty of times when Dana and I will meet someone and we'll look at each other and go, that guy is going to be a big deal eventually. Like, he's the next generation of what we're doing now. So like Dana said, hopefully we'll have a lot of those people lined up who are ready and willing and capable of dealing with these types of things when we're gone.
Does Lorraine still have all of the objects that they acquired over the years?
I think they do.
They're
as far as I know.
still there. Yeah. I mean, I know that they were selling stuff off. I don't know if it was haunted stuff, but they were selling a lot of our stuff off already.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll pleasantly find out one day, hopefully in her case many years from now, that you've been written into the will.
Oh, that would be...
I'm not gonna hold my breath on that one. I think the relatives realize the franchise rights are pretty hot right now.
I think there's another Conjuring movie coming out as well, so they probably wouldn't want to get rid of any of that stuff anytime soon.
That stuff's staying with the relatives, I think.
Okay. Well,
one can dream, though.
Right.
Annabelle shows up on our front door one day. That would be...
I'd have more questions if that happened.
So, going through all these methods of investigation and checking out objects and going to places and, doing what you guys do and doing what we all love to do so much, what do you think about this tendency to be very materialistic in the method of investigating the paranormal? Because, I've discussed this with another friend of mine, and something he always likes to bring up is that maybe the phenomena we keep finding is being some kind of input into our consciousness, we experience it as a sensory input, but it might actually be closer to clairaudience or clairvoyance.
You're getting me excited now. I'm getting hot. This is right up my alley. I think Dan and I can agree. Gadgets with blinky lights on them are fun. They're great. And they look good on TV, which is why we see so many of them, because people are so heavily influenced by the stuff that we see on TV. That stuff's great. It measures things, and having that kind of data is really important. But when it comes to the paranormal, the thing that I think a lot of people forget is the paranormal is a very subjective thing. It's a subjective experience. It's very hard to measure. Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest mistakes that investigators make is saying that what they're doing is science and saying we're a scientific team and we use scientific methods, because you don't. Until you can get a ghost to appear in a lab, you're not really doing science. Not real good science anyway. Which is, and you're just giving the skeptics ammunition. What we're doing is more akin to detective work. We're trying to establish patterns, and we're writing down stories, and we're collecting data. We're collecting personal experiences. So our, the way that we approach the paranormal is very much, it's a subjective experience. So we need to subject ourselves to it. We need to do everything we can to I don't know, to try get abducted by aliens. You know what I mean? Like, we need to do what we can do to have that experience, to really understand it. And I think that a big part of that is because, a perfect example of this, tell the story about Mackinac.
I was just thinking that. Yeah. So 2 years ago, we visited Mackinac Island in Michigan, and it's a huge island that is pretty much completely haunted. And we were staying, we were doing an event there, and so there were a lot of people. We were doing an investigation one night in one of the suites of the hotels that we were staying at, called Harvey Suite. So Harvey was a college student at the time. The area, the resort was a dorm, and so there were a lot of kids that lived there, and Harvey was one of the kids, and he fell in love with someone, and the love was not reciprocated. So he became really depressed and kind of locked himself in his room and became a sort of hermit, like a shut-in for a while, and then inevitably committed suicide, which is awful. And so we were in Harvey's suite, and Greg and I were, we were sort of aware of what had happened in the room. And I mean, he hadn't committed suicide in the room, but he had spent a lot of time in there, and there was a lot of sadness in the room. And so we were being very sensitive about how we were going to investigate the space, because we didn't want to go into a place that had so much sadness and be like, tell us your name, that kind of stuff. And so, the night had kind of progressed, and some people had experiences that were interesting, but nothing really crazy had happened. So with the last group of people, we had been in the room for about 45 minutes with this last group of people.
And it's a tight space, and
pretty
there were
small, yeah.
What would you say, 30 people crammed in there?
Maybe even 30, 35 people in this room. And so
it was getting warm.
It was getting a little warm. And I was sort of standing back near the front door a little bit, and I started noticing a really, really overpowering smell of body odor. Like, it was just undeniable. It was like awful. And at first I was like, oh man, it's definitely getting ripe in here. But then I started thinking, wait a minute, this isn't like a just out of nowhere smell. This is like if this person had walked in this room the second they walked in the room, right, we all would have smelled it. And so my brain is going, and I'm kind of like looking around, and I'm smelling, and I'm noticing the lady next to me is also kind of doing the same thing. And we sort of like looked at each other.
Like, I was who stinks?
Yeah, and she was like, she was the braver one than I was. I didn't want to be rude, but she was like, do you smell that? It smells really bad. And I was like, yeah, it smells like body odor. And we asked the rest of the group, again, this group of 30, 35 people, does anybody else smell that? And no one in the group smelled it. Not one other person. They were like, nope, we don't smell anything. And I was like, it is unbelievable. So again, if you think about it, Harvey had been in this room kind of shut in for a long time. He was really depressed. He definitely wasn't bathing, and he was bummed out and probably smelled pretty bad. So that experience was crazy in and of itself, and the fact that no one else experienced it was crazy. But as we were walking back, and again, this was the last group of the night, so as we were walking back to meet up with everyone, she kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, well, what's even crazier about this is I don't have a sense of smell. She's physically not capable of smelling anything, but yet she and I at this particular moment experienced the exact same smell. So what is it saying about how spirits are interacting with us? Are they using our bodies? Are they using our minds? Are they triggering memories? What are they doing in order to get us to have these experiences? Because it has to be more than, sort of what we can measure with blinking lights and
That's why I get so frustrated when skeptics will look at people doing, using a Ouija board or automatic writing or whatever, and they're like, well, it's just your ideomotor frequencies working. And I'm like, duh, of course. Like, they need us.
Yeah.
There's something about us that they need to be able to communicate. They have to use us. We're the vehicle they're most familiar with.
Exactly. And that's it. Like, when you're alive, you function in a body. You don't function in a K2 or, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like you're functioning in your human body. So you would think that when you die, if you were still here, that would probably be the most familiar thing for you to try to influence or cause some kind of change in.
So the long-winded answer to your question is, I think a lot of this stuff is dependent on some, latent clairvoyancy or, subtle manipulation of the human body or the human mind. I think absolutely. And that's something it's not very easily measured.
No, we could be missing the boat as paranormal investigators by not researching more in depth with techniques of ESP related skills.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100%.
And believe it or not, to everyone listening, there's a great deal of research. It was done on ESP and related subjects that's been thoroughly researched and sadly kind of lost to history. And it was all done at Duke University many years ago. And I'm sure that's not the only place you could find it. So,
well, even today, there are people like Rupert Sheldrake is a perfect person that comes to mind. He's done and been part of tons of different research that has, you press a skeptic, and they have to reluctantly agree when they look at the data. That's the problem, is getting them to actually look at the data. They have to reluctantly agree that ESP has been scientifically proven by all scientific points. It has been proven, but so many of them have a hard time looking at that data because it's outside of their worldview.
Absolutely. And you're right. It has been proven. And you can go beyond just the scientific texts, start exploring into the magic and the occult, and find plenty of advice on how to tune in to unseen forces out there. But I like how you bring up that this is a subjective thing and how everything becomes down to something subjective. And a great example of that is if I say to you, what do you think about a Ouija board, or what do you think the common reaction to a Ouija board is? What would you say?
Oh, people are terrified of them.
For sure.
Yeah, they say don't play with them.
Absolutely. And it ties back to that whole thing we got to at the beginning. People say, oh, demons. Exactly. You're going to invite demons into your house.
But it's because they work.
But ultimately, what is it you're using a Ouija board for? What's the purpose?
You're talking to your subconscious.
Well, you're talking to unseen forces, right?
Yeah.
Your subconscious, spirits, anything that you're trying to reach, it's an unseen force you're trying to connect with. And people are afraid of it. But if I grab a digital recorder and I step into an empty room and I say, tell me your name.
It's funny, too, because it makes me think of something that happens a lot. So when we have a museum set up at an event, a lot of people will come up to the museum and they'll be like, oh, no, I'm not touching any of this kind of stuff. I don't want to have anything to do with this.
No, my favorite is they go, I've been an investigator for 45 years and I don't mess with haunted objects.
And we're like, but you investigate, right? And they're like, yeah. And we're like, so you investigate buildings? And they're like, yeah. And we'll go, so you investigate gigantic haunted objects.
You will stand inside a haunted object, but you won't go near a little one on a table.
They'll be like, oh.
Well, just next time you run into said man, remind him that the earth is very old.
Yeah.
And lots of people have lived and died. And if it were just people alone, dead people alone haunting the earth, and I think there's much more than that.
Oh, you're getting groped 24/7. They're standing there in the shower with you. They're staring at your boners. They know what's going on.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
That has to be a t-shirt, just says ghosts on the front and the back says staring at your boners.
You get in that merchandising.
It's a good idea.
That's right. Go back to your Who Forted days a little bit.
Oh, God. Yeah, no joke.
Little toilet humor.
Now, part of the museum, you guys have launched a great membership program. And for everyone out there, I'm also a member. I'm also a client. And it's really great what you guys are doing with that. Part of that program, and I'll make sure that everybody knows how to find it, get a hold of you, join up as soon as we're near the end here. Dana is running a Magic of the Month Club, which seems to have a very enthusiastic membership.
It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. Really awesome to see you doing what I think, of all the purposes I have in life, I believe re-enchanting the world is one of them. And
I love the way you put that.
Yes.
Re-enchanting the world.
Yeah, and Dana, you are definitely a grand high poobah of doing such.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Really for me, that's kind of the motivation, is like reminding people that the world isn't a mundane place, that it's very magical, and it just really depends on how you look at it and whether you're willing to kind of embrace that. So, and for the most part, people have been amazingly excited about it and really positive, and I love it because it just adds that much more magic to my own life. So it's kind of a win-win situation for everybody.
Yeah. I suspected you were into magic when I met you because we were all talking about stuff, and I spied the deck of tarot cards. I'm like, oh, hey, you read tarot, huh? Me too. But that's not what we were there for. When did you get started in magic?
I originally, probably around, and this is going to age me, probably around 1996. And like, it's funny because people always, whenever I talk to them about magic or I talk to them about the occult, a lot of people will say to me like, oh, I've been interested in magic for a long time, but it wasn't because of like the craft or anything like that. And I always go, really? Because that was exactly why I started getting interested in magic. Because I was a 16-year-old girl and I was like, this is amazing. This movie influenced me completely. And I'm absolutely willing to own that. I don't care.
I love that neither of you have shame. Yeah. Buffy for ghosts, Charmed in the craft for magic. Yeah.
But it was obviously a movie, but it was a sort of a beginning, first steps of where I became interested. And so, yeah, probably all the way back to 2000 or 1996. It's been a while.
Yeah. So what traditions of magic have you explored and practiced?
For the most part, I try not to, as corny as this sounds, I really try not to label myself too much, because I find that like the second I sort of label myself, I start finding my interests lie in other areas. So I just sort of let it happen. But I would consider myself an eclectic, probably pagan. But really for the most part, it's all aspects of magic, and my interests are all over the board, and I try to include as much of it as I possibly can in my own practice. Very
cool. So as a magical practitioner, how does that influence your paranormal investigations?
One of the things that happened to us recently, a year or so ago, was our friend Ty Gowan from HauntME sort of reached out and said, hey, we have this web series. Will you watch this? And be a part of an episode. And Greg and I, after we watched the episode, looked at each other and went like, oh my God, we found other people that do it the way that we do it. Because magic is, and my practice is really something that I think definitely adds to our paranormal research. I think that there's a huge place for the metaphysics in research, and I think that it's something that we can utilize constantly. And unfortunately, for the most part, a lot of people don't necessarily agree. And that's okay. It definitely hasn't stopped me from doing it, and clearly other people from doing it. So I always try to get people to sort of be more open to doing things like, for instance, if you're investigating a place, set up a communication altar, set up a place that's creating energy in a space that lets people know that you want to communicate with them, that gives them a little bit more, energy to communicate with you. These are tools that we can be using that can benefit us. So there's really no reason for why we wouldn't, or why we shouldn't be using them.
I think just to add, I think that doing that and incorporating that too, because I do think that the paranormal is such a subjective thing, I'm not a super heavy magic practitioner. Most of the stuff that I know because I've seen her do it. I've seen her practice it. But just being a part of that type of thing and being a part of a little ritual, before or after an investigation, it helps prime you, I think, in a mental capacity for these types of experiences. And it puts you in the mindset where you're more open to these types of experiences. So I think it's immensely valuable, to have someone who's doing that with you. If you really want to experience what's going on there and you really want to be open to the experience, I think that having someone who's a magic practitioner there with you, helps immensely.
I like that you guys are out there not only, you've really pushed the envelope on what people see the paranormal field on all fronts. You two have gained quite a bit of influence, and I think it's great that you have, because you're challenging the status quo in a lot of ways, whether it's through your explanation of intent and the relationship with these objects, or if it's Dana spreading the word of magic and re-enchanting the world. I'm very glad to see you two out there doing the work.
That means a lot.
Yeah,
it means a lot.
Thank you.
Especially because, my humble way of looking at it is there's a lot of people out there who are doing it the same way. And there's no sense in us just adding to the pile. Sometimes we're going to do stuff that maybe doesn't pan out, and there's going to be a lot of hours potentially wasted on something that doesn't work. But at the same time, I think that even if we're helping kind of push the field into places that it's maybe uncomfortable to go, and maybe people are uncomfortable getting to, that alone is probably worth the effort.
Absolutely. Where can people find the museum, and what do they do to be a member of it? Why should they?
I think people, if they're interested in the paranormal, and people are they want to help the mission of spreading the word that it's not something to be afraid of, but it's something to be understood and something to be compassionate about. If they feel that way about haunted objects, if they want to be part of a really fun, cool club and get cool stuff, and join the Magic of the Month Club.
One of the things we like to do too, often is, we show a lot of the museum members the objects that we get as we get them. So you kind of get a behind the scenes look at like a lot of the things that we get, whether they're haunted or they're not. We kind of put them all out on display so museum members can kind of get a good look at them before everybody else does.
And at the end of the month, everybody's going to get a membership card. Which,
that too,
come on,
yeah.
you're part of a club. And it's fun. It's a fun way to be involved in the paranormal, even if you don't have to be an investigator to be involved and to help influence the field in a positive way. And that's what we're trying to do with the museum. So if people want to learn more about the museum and about being a museum member, they can go to patreon.com/paramuseum. If they want to get an idea more about what the museum's about and what kind of stuff we've got in the museum, they can just go to paramuseum.com.
Okay. And what do you guys want to be remembered for?
Oh man, that's so hard.
I hope people, when they look back, if we're long gone, I hope they look at us and think that we at least try to do something different, and we're more focused on compassion and curiosity and adventure and fun than we were on fear. I think that's what I want. I want to be remembered as being a person who was spreading fun and adventure and curiosity.
That sounds like a good way to be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
I would take that.
We'll see how badly I can screw it up.
Yeah.
that makes for me too.
That guy was a huge nerd.
That's right.
That's what they're gonna say. What a nerd.
That'll be your legacy, Greg. They'll be like, but Dana was awesome though.
I'm taking you down with me.
Do you have any parting thoughts?
Ooh.
They're just sitting here staring at each other.
I guess be curious.
Yeah.
About everything.
Yeah. And don't approach things with fear. Don't approach things with fear. It's easy to do that in this field when things are strange and we don't understand them and they seem unnatural. But I think that if you are able to push past that initial fear and approach things with a sense of curiosity and openness, not just the paranormal becomes a better place, but the whole world becomes a better place. Your outlook on the world in general will become more interesting and magical and fun. And I mean, who doesn't want the world to be more fun? I mean, look at the state of it. You know what I mean?
Agreed. Thank you guys for being here. It's been an incredible honor to have you on the show. I really hope that everyone out there enjoys this and starts finding their way to the museum.
Well, thank you so much for having us. It's been a long time coming.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Okay, gang, that's a wrap on this episode of Weird Web Radio. Once again, thank you all for listening. Now, it's time for you to go join the official Weird Web Radio membership. Go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio and you can choose your rewards and become a member today. Enjoy all the exclusive benefits, inside information, and plenty of bonus audio with each guest. Now, you can find the show at weirdwebradio.com and weirdwebradio.libsyn.com. The show is listed on Facebook and Twitter as Weird Web Radio, and you can find me on Instagram as just Lonnie_Scott. Please remember to rate and comment and share the shows that you like, and it helps others find us in all the search results. Shoot me an email if you want to be a guest on the show, or if you know someone that would be a great guest in upcoming episodes. You can send that to weirdwebradio@gmail.com. Seek the mysteries and delights in life, my friends. As always, stay weird out there.